and welcome to episode 54 of This Week in Germany. As every week, we'll be bringing the world to Germany and Germany to the world with news for the week beginning the 12th of January 2015. My name's Daniel.
And I'm Rob. Each week, we bring you stories from German news, society, and culture in the English language. If you want to find out more, including ways to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and SoundCloud, head over to our website, thisweekingermany.de.
This week in Germany, in the wake of the Charlie Hebdo attacks in France, we take a look at Germany's reaction among the public, politicians, and in the media.
We'll be checking out a military history museum in our travel section.
As from now, we're going to take a look at a new German film every month with our film club. January's film is the Baader Meinhof Complex, which we'll be discussing in today's program.
And speaking of film, our German of the Week, a tribute to the classic science fiction film during the anniversary of Metropolis. Director Fritz and screenwriter Thea von Harbou.
All that plus the rest of the week's news in brief coming up.
So let's get started with story one. On Wednesday, Islamic extremist gunmen broke into the office of a French satirical newspaper in Paris named Charlie Hebdo and shot dead 12 people, including the editor, Stéphane Charbonnier, and wounded 11 others. A subsequent hostage-taking at a Jewish supermarket in the city, where 4 hostages died, was also linked to the earlier shooting. Immediately after the attacks were announced, there was an outpouring of grief, condolences, and anger from across the world.
Shortly before recording, it was reported that the daily newspaper the Hamburger Morgenpost was firebombed after publishing Charlie Hebdo cartoons on its front page in a suspected act of retaliation, though police say it is too soon to make a definitive connection. To give us an insight into Germany's reaction to the attacks, freelance journalist Ben Knight is joining us from Berlin. So, Ben, what was the German political reaction to the attacks?
Well, obviously, Merkel started by, giving her condolences, but beyond that, she also underlined the fact that the vast majority of Muslims enjoy a good relations with Germans, and sort of following on from her New Year's address, where she also brought up what do you say? Tried to calm the waters that have been stirred up by the Pegida movement. So, I mean, she made that quite clear quite early on. But then again, the CSU, her sister party, the Bavarian sister party, also conservatives, they immediately, within 24 hours actually of the original attack, produced a paper underlining all the new security measures that they wanted to bring in, including they wanted to get rid of the data storage laws, which was an issue that had been sort of put to bed in 2010 when it was ruled unconstitutional. They wanted to just to do with storing the telecom data of German citizens, and they wanted to bring in like a sort of German version of the Patriot Act, like making it easier for the police to arrest people, all that kind of thing. So that was already became part of the political reaction within 24 hours.
Well, I know that Heiko Maas from the SPD, he said, I believe he's the Interior Minister, the Justice Minister, I should say. He said that it shouldn't be necessary to bring in this data storage law, and that perhaps this event should not be leveraged to bring in a strengthening of security laws and therefore not infringe on Germans' privacy. And also the point that you mentioned about the Muslim reaction as well. The Central Council of Muslims has organised a vigil at Brandenburg Gate, which will take place on Monday the 12th of January, which will be combined into an anti-Pegida demonstration as well. So it's a particularly sensitive time in Germany, especially with the Pegida protests and counter-protests. So how will the events in Paris affect Pegida, if at all?
Well, Pegida immediately announced on their Facebook page that their Monday demonstration, they've been having demonstrations every Monday, and immediately said the Monday demonstration would be in mourning for the people who died in the Charlie Hebdo offices. And that was immediately condemned by the anti-Pegida movement as a kind of, the co-opting the issue and this attack. And I mean, obviously, this is for Pegida, it's a hugely exciting, event, because it seems to be confirming all their worst fears. And I mean, you can already see if you read their Facebook page, the next thing that they posted was all about the threats, the security threats in Germany of so-called extremists, and how many extremists, the figures of how many extremists are supposed to be in Germany, and they immediately posted that. So it kind of they very much co-opted the whole incident.
Yeah, I mean, Pegida is against what they call the Islamization of the West, saying that the Christian culture, as they put it, is being systematically destroyed by Islam. And yet Charlie Hebdo did several critical cartoons of Christianity as well on a regular basis. They criticize Christianity too. So maybe that would also be an anti-Pegida message as well. So it's a bit odd to see Pegida involved in that kind of way, but we'll be tracking the Pegida story over the next few weeks as well. So how did the media and the public respond to the attacks in Germany?
Well, there was an immediate outpouring of support, and a lot of people used the hashtag that went around the world, the Je suis Charlie hashtag, and a lot of newspapers published it on their front page. There was one newspaper, the BZ, the Berlin tabloid, actually reprinted a lot of the cartoons, a lot of the Charlie Hebdo cartoons, including some of the more anti-Islamic ones, on their front page, which was I noticed, which was widely applauded in the Twitter sphere. And they put they covered the whole front page on their back page with all the covers, like a big stream of about 20 or 30 famous Charlie Hebdo covers, and that was like. And people applauded them for their courage and their bravery. And I think there's been a big, in the media especially, there's been a big a debate, because obviously a lot of the police were putting, there was a police presence outside a lot of editorial offices around Germany. So there was and there was a debate across Germany about whether or not we should now publish these cartoons, which would not have been published in any German newspaper. A lot of them wouldn't have dared to a week ago, because they've been considered offensive to Muslims. And the
same in the UK as well. I noticed that the UK press tended to show the pictures of the attackers rather than publishing cartoons, and I can't think of any UK newspaper which decided to do that. But it was widespread in France and in Germany that the cartoons themselves were published. Do you think that there's a wider fear in the German public and among officials who are in the know as to the possibility of an attack occurring in Germany?
Oh yeah, I mean the BKA, which is the German Federal Police, they there was reports in it. They didn't make the statement themselves, but there was reports in 2 German magazines today which suggest that they leaked the reports, saying that they've put Germany on a higher level of alertness. Like they've said that there are 260. They came up with this number, 260 so-called Islamist extremists who are said to be possibly violent, possibly dangerous, and they will be keeping a closer watch on them.
Great, thank you very much, Ben Knight, for joining us on This Week in Germany.
That was freelance journalist Ben Knight. If you would like to read more on his reporting of German politics and society, visit his website, benknight.de. This is the News in Brief. Bodo Ramelow, the new minister-president of Thuringia, made history when he and the Left Party won for the first time. It turns out now that even with the coalition formed between the Left Party, the SPD, and the Greens, he came close to losing what was thought to be a sure thing. two anonymous members of the SPD came forward last week to tell a local newspaper that they had been approached before the elections by a competing political party member of the CDU, and that they had been offered bribes not to vote for Romulo. As the election came down to only one vote that gave the majority to the Left Party and their coalition members, a trick like this could have stopped Romulo from winning. The Left Party chief has called for an investigation as soon as possible. The search in New Zealand for 2 missing Germans and 1 missing Australian has been called off after a week of searching. The German man and his son, as well as an Australian doctor, had set off to climb the tallest mountain in New Zealand. They were all roped together and started hiking from the back of the mountain and were due back this past Monday, but never showed up. A 6-day search was made, but turned up nothing, and the police senior constable has now called it off. He said that while the weather has been clear, there were still plenty of hazards on the mountain. More than 230 people have died there. Unfortunately, it seems like the trio did not bring an emergency locator beacon with them, and the cell phone reception there is poor. Police say that there is nothing more they can do, but they would reevaluate their search plans if new information was presented. Since the time Germany and the EU have started economic sanctions against Russia for the issues in Ukraine, many on both sides have been ready for them to end. While the sanctions themselves are meant as a punishment towards Russia, it is hurting those in the European Union as well. It was mentioned that sanctions might need to be scaled back as they have not changed Russia's stance in Ukraine. This led the Ukrainian Prime Minister to fly to Berlin to speak to Angela Merkel. She made it clear to him that Russia would need to meet every point of the proposed truth before they would have their previous access to the EU capital markets. Pressure by the members of the opposition party in Germany, the SPD, are saying that the continuation of sanctions will force Russia into an economic chaos, which will in turn be bad for Germany. And that's the news in brief. If you would like a quick and simple way to keep up with the latest from Germany, sign up for our weekly email newsletter, and you can find that on our website, thisweekingermany.de.
But now it's time to move on to our second main story of the week. A nurse at Delmenhorst Hospital near Bremen, who is referred to as Niels H. by the press, has admitted deliberately killing 30 patients in his care by injecting them with cardiovascular medication, it was revealed on Thursday. However, he is suspected of having killed as many as 178 between 2003 and 2005. A psychiatric expert who analysed the accused said that the nurse purposefully used the drugs to induce a medical emergency, therefore giving him an opportunity to attempt resuscitation and show off his CPR skills to colleagues. He said that 60 patients survived, but denies any more than 30 deaths. Niels H. has already spent more than 7 years in prison for attempted murder after a colleague caught him administering an overdose. The newspaper The Guardian reported a colleague who had worked with him for 3 years said that not only was the nurse involved in an above-average number of resuscitation cases, but that he seemed particularly distraught when his patients died. As part of the investigation, the bodies of his patients are to be exhumed where possible, and the archived files of those under his care are to be studied for any proof of his involvement in their deaths.
Coming up right now is Destination Germany. We're going to take you on a journey somewhere in the country that is well worth a visit. Whether you're a tourist, a permanent resident, a foreigner, or a German citizen. Here, we'll be covering the famous sites as well as the little-known corners of Deutschland. All that matters is showing you that Germany is an interesting and exciting place to visit. And if you enjoy the destinations that we talk about each week, check out our website, thisweekingermany.de, and we'll have photos of each week's destination.
Last week we found out about and talked a little about a piece of history which is tucked away but still can be visited in Germany today. Many universities and even some high schools have prisons that misbehaving students could be incarcerated in. While these were not the maximum security prisons you might see on television these days, if you got into trouble while attending school, you could find yourself confined to a sparse room for a few days to a few months. These student prisons are obviously not in use today, but you can still visit them as the surviving detention centres are now protected museums. So don't forget to check out our previous episode if you want all the information on those student prisons.
This week, we're going to be checking out a specific museum that is located in the city of Dresden. Our destination is the Bundeswehr Military History Museum. This museum houses records and exhibits from military history starting way back to 1300.
Wow, that sounds pretty interesting. So where in Dresden can we find it?
From the train station, you can take a tram to the Stauffenberg Alley. From there, you can't miss it. The museum by itself is in an old armory building that was built in the mid-1800s. Though it became a museum shortly after in 1897. It was first a Nazi museum, and then a Soviet museum, and then an East German museum.
And now it's a military museum, so this building has gone through quite a lot of changes.
It actually closed down completely in 1989 when the reunification process was taking place. It was decided in 2001 that it would become a museum that would show people a way to reconsider the way they think about war. And in 2011, it officially opened as the Bundeswehr Military History Museum.
So this is not your run-of-the-mill normal National History Museum, so what's so special about it?
The museum is trying to distance itself from those military museums that seem to glorify war and battles. This museum tries to show what the causes were that led to war and what the consequences were of the aftermath. It will show visitors a human component of war and the feeling and thoughts of all those involved.
So that does sound like an appropriate idea or a theme for a military history museum. So visitors really can learn something here which is different from what they could learn at national military history museums from other countries.
That's right. The museum doesn't even stop there. The museum encourages dialogue from the visitors, and if they'll try and answer any questions that people might have.
So how much time would I need if I went to this museum, and would I need more than a few hours to see everything?
They do have quite a lot of information and exhibits, so it really depends on the individual of how fast or how slow they want to take it. There are two main ways to view the museum. You can focus just on military themes, or you can focus on chronological events. And just to give you an idea of how much they have to offer, they have 11 different theme tours that focus on different aspects of war. There are also 4 different tours for chronological events. If learning about military, war, and history from a humanistic standpoint with employees who are there to answer questions is something you might be interested in, the Bundeswehr Military History Museum in Dresden will be a great destination.
I'm now joined by filmmaker Malachi Ray Rempen for our This Week in Germany Film Club. Each month we're going to watch a film from Germany and discuss the themes it brings up. So people who've heard the program before will know you as a comic author.
Cartoonist.
That's
right.
And you can listen to the full interview all about Malachi's work, Itchy Feet, in This Week in Germany Extra. But what people might not know is that your day job, so to speak, your trade is as a filmmaker.
Filmmaker, that's right. I trained in it. I've worked in the last few years, and it's definitely my passion. So I love watching movies, I love making movies, and let's talk about one.
Great. So what is January's film in our film club?
January's film club film, Daniel, is Der Baader Meinhof Complex.
So let's take a listen to a clip.
Germany, 1967. The children of the Nazi generation have grown up in the ruin their parents created. They vowed fascism would never rule their country again.
Diesmal werden wir Widerstand leisten. Wir haben eine Verantwortung vor der Geschichte. Wir bauen eine Gruppe auf. Wir werden die politischen Verhältnisse ändern.
That was a clip from the English language trailer of Baader Meinhof Complex. So, Malachi, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the background of the film.
It was made in 2008 about the left-wing extremist group RAF, which is Rote Armee Fraktion. They were a left-wing extremist group, terrorist group, that in the 1970s sort of carry out bank robberies, bomb attacks, executions, hijackings, kidnappings, all kinds of bloody and violent things, all in the name of fighting the man.
Yeah, fighting against American imperialism and so on, or what they perceived as that, against things like the war in Vietnam, and also the fact that Germany supported America by allowing them to have military bases.
All the people that were in power after the war were Nazis, or they were, if not directly Nazis, then they were part of they were still in control. The principals of the schools, the people running the government institutions. A lot of them were the same people that were running these institutions during the Third Reich, and there was a lot of disgruntlement from the kids from that. And so that part of the reason that this group became so powerful and became so inspiring to younger people is because they were like, we're fighting against authority in the way that our parents failed to and continue to fail to do.
So, what did you think of the film filmically, in terms of the way that it was made? Was it a well-made film?
Absolutely. It's an expertly made film in every single way. It reminded me a lot of Steven Spielberg's film Munich, which is thematically very similar. It's also about a group of extremists, a group of terrorists from Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, who, after the Munich Olympics, carried out a series of revenge terrorist attacks on various people within the Palestinian world in Europe. And it owes a lot to that film, not just thematically sort of discussing violence, discussing revenge, terrorism, this kind of thing, but also in the look, in the cinematography, and the sort of muted tones of Germany, and the fractured narrative, and the way it reproduces real life events. It's very similar. So if you enjoyed that film, you will love Der Baader Meinhof Complex.
So do you think it shows a particular style of German filmmaking?
I think what's great about it is that you get to see the German perspective of what happened in the 70s, how the Germans reacted to the violence of left-wing groups and extremists in the Vietnam War, how they reacted to that. That's not something you often get to see, and it's a very important and deep wound still in German history. These attacks that the RAF perpetrated was the bloodiest thing that happened in Germany since World War II, and so it's a deep scar in German society, and they face it in this film with the filmmakers, with their trademark just sober honesty and total transparency, and the way that they do with almost everything in their very bloody history.
But the first half of the film has been criticized for kind of making the violent group, the left-wing terrorist group, Rote Armee-Fraktion, seem attractive and appealing, whilst the second half, which is mostly to do with the court cases, is the half where their ideology comes undone, and it ends up seeming like a crazed series of murders of a group which is trying to lash out as they're falling apart and disagreeing. Do you think the film glorifies these left-wing groups too much, or at all? I mean, how would you...
That was certainly some of the criticism that came out, especially from the older generation, saying, like, this film makes them look cool, it makes them look sexy, and they were terrorists. And the answer is, they were cool, they were sexy. That's how the younger generation saw them at that time. And the film doesn't shy away from that. They were sunglass-wearing, rifle-toting cowboys. They were fighting against the man, and that's how the younger generation saw them. And again, their ideology comes undone, as you say, and they are extremists. But to try and present them in any other light than what they were seen as historically, I think it would be disingenuous. And so this is an excellent way of doing it completely transparently. Okay,
so would you recommend the film to people who are interested in Germany, and would you recommend the film to people in general who maybe don't really have a particular interest for German history as just a film to watch on a weekend, let's say?
All of the above. It's it sounds maybe from how we've described it as being political thriller, that there's a lot of talking. There's really not. It's like every opportunity to have a gunfight or an explosion, they film it from every angle, and it's an action-packed film. It's also it's not a fun film or a funny film, but it's sober and serious, but it's...
exciting?
It's 2.5 hours long, and it goes by like that.
Okay, so you definitely recommend the film to everyone then?
Yes, that's right, Daniel.
Okay, thank you, Malachi. So that was the Baader Meinhof Complex. What about February's film?
Next month, we're going to be talking about one of my personal favorite films of all time, which is... Himmel über Berlin, which is, in English, it's called Wings of Desire. And it's a film made in the year I was born, 1987, and about a couple of angels living in Berlin. It's an amazing film. Definitely watch it, and we'll talk about it next month.
Yes, and send in all of your comments about the film as well, and we'll read them out in the programme during our film club in February. Next up, our German of the Week section, where we discuss a prominent person from this week's news, a German citizen, or even a foreigner who we deem an honorary German, who has had an effect, for better or worse, on German culture, society, or politics.
Two are sharing the honor as German of the Week, and neither are unaccustomed to the spotlight. This episode, we look at the lives of Fritz Lang and Thea von Harbou. This couple were the driving force behind the epic 1927 German impressionist science fiction film Metropolis, which celebrated the anniversary of its release on the 10th of January. Fritz Lang was a filmmaker and screenwriter and started working in a German film studio right as the expressionist movement was growing. He met his wife, von Harbou, when the two were working on the film Dr. Mabuse the Gambler. Though Thea von Harbou was already married, she left her husband for Lang. Both von Harbou and Lang wrote the science fiction pioneering film that became Metropolis, and Lang directed it. After the film's release, he said that it was silly and stupid, but later he really liked it as space travel became a reality in his lifetime. The couple had a relatively short marriage and divorced in 1933. Due to the politics of the Nazi regime, Lang left Germany first to Paris and then on to Hollywood, California in 1936. Von Harbou opted to stay loyal and stayed in Germany. But both continued to work in the film industry for the rest of their lives. And that brings us to the end of episode number 54. We definitely like to thank all of you for leaving your ratings and reviews on iTunes.
This one from Red Pickle in the UK version of iTunes reads, I live in Germany but don't yet have the language skills to keep up with internal news here. It's great to have a summary of news in English so I don't feel ignorant.
Yes, thanks, Red Pickle. If you're an iTunes subscriber, please leave us a rating or review. It's one of the ways that you can support our podcast for free, and it really helps us find more listeners.
So you can give us 5 stars if you really like us. That would be great. This Week in Germany is produced by me, Daniel Winter, and is written and presented by myself and Rob Bishop. Our political correspondent this week was Ben Knight, who you can find at benknight.de, and our films contributor was Malachi Ray Rempen. You can find all of his work via his comics website, itchyfeetcomic.com.
If you'd like to get in touch, subscribe to us in iTunes, get weekly email updates, or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or SoundCloud. All the details are on our website, thisweekingermany.de.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back next Monday with more of This Week in Germany.